There are very few connections in this world that we as humans can all collectively agree on. Besides breathing, eating, drinking, and a social nature, humans as a whole seem to have nothing completely in common. Languages change, religions differ, and the very definition of right and wrong is a topic which can only be found in a regional level. One universal cultural and religious tale that has its roots in nearly every country and religion throughout the world, however, is the tale of a cataclysmic event, a flood, that encompassed the earth and gave way to a new era of humanity. Today, we investigate the God connection and the Great Flood. Our story starts in the Genesis era, approximately 622 years after the creation of Adam, with the birth of the biblical legend Enoch. This time period was known as the antediluvian period and highlights the works of God and man between the fall of man out of Eden and the Great Flood. Enoch, son of Jared, became the seventh of the pre-deluge patriarchs featured in the Torah, or Pentateuch. It should be noted that before the deluge, records indicate that it wasn't uncommon for people to live several hundreds of years. Enoch prophesied the coming of a great flood, as told in Enoch 83, 3-8. In a vision I saw the waters of heaven thrown down upon the earth. Also, parts of the earth fell into a great abyss, and mountains piled on mountains, and hills sank. Tall trees were ripped out by the roots. I began to shout, "The earth is destroyed." Mallalel awakened to me and said, "Why do you cry and moan, my son?" I told him the vision. He said, "Your vision concerns the sin of the earth. It is about to be destroyed. Now you should arise and intercede." Enoch even cryptically included the tale of an upcoming flood through the name of his son, which was Methuselah, which means he who demands his death. When Enoch's great-grandson Noah came of age, the God of the Old Testament grew tired of the misdeeds and crookedness of humanity and proclaimed a mass extinction was necessary. This cataclysmic event was not simply a display of the wrath of God, but a reversal of creation. God wanted the corruptness of an adult humanity to regress back into a fetal state to save it from itself. In 1656, after the creation of Adam, the Great Flood commenced, and the only earthly beings left alive were the microcosm inside of Noah's Ark. After the water receded, God made a covenant to Noah that never again shall the wrath of God be laid down in a similar fashion towards humanity until the raptures of the Revelation. But what tales do other cultures tell of the flood? In ancient Egyptian mythology, there are a few different stories of a massive flood caused by divine intervention. The most popular of these revolves around the sun god Ra and his daughter, the feline goddess Sekhmet. Ra ruled as a kind of chief to the gods. The serpent god Apep, god of darkness and night, battled regularly with Ra to control the earth and its people. Apep, with his snake-like figure and violent tendencies, was feared by many of the people living in Egypt. As Ra became aged, he quickly lost followers to his enemy. Angered by their lack of faith, Ra sent down the cow goddess Hathor, mother of earthly beings, in the form of his eye, to enact retribution on those who decided to follow Apep. This newly formed deity was called Sekhmet, the Bloody, as she gained strength in the presence of blood. Sekhmet burned crops in the fields, destroyed homes and temples, and killed every human that she came across. At first, Ra was content with his creation. The followers of Apep were soon to be no more. After a while, though, he became concerned, for Sekhmet was determined to kill everyone, Ra's loyal followers included. He bargained Sekhmet to stop her rampage of the earth, but so caught up in her bloody conquest, she could not hear Ra's command. It was time for Ra's priests to come up with a plan. With Ra's help, they dyed the sacramental wine red and covered the entire earth with it. Thinking it was blood, Sekhmet drank it, and soon she became drunk. She then lost all interest in killing and promptly fell asleep. There is still held a festival on the Nile where wine is drunk in remembrance of the flood and the plan that saved humanity from the evil goddess. It should be noted that the ram god Khnum is regularly credited with the flooding of the Nile, but the severity of the Nile's flooding is dwarfed by the Great Flood of Ra. In modern archaeology, it is known that the Great Flood, or at least a Great Flood, encompassed Egypt around 9,000 years ago. The remains of this mass event are said to still be seen on the Great Sphinx of Giza in the form of a ring-shaped erosion, which has caused some historians to date the massive sandstone statue even older than previously thought. The Great Flood of the Bible is said to have happened around 4,500 years ago, although different forms of record-keeping and timekeeping were used in ancient times, which may have altered the actual date. Either way, both stories tell a simple tale of humanity's own choices, leading to a divine cleansing of those who turned away from the Supreme Being. In ancient India, the Hindu religion tells a very curious tale of mass aquatic cataclysm. First appearing in the Shatapatha Brahmana, and later in the Puranas and Mahabharata, the Hindu tale of a great flood shares eerie similarities to another, despite being geographically distant from each other. The story begins with a man named Manu, who was at the water's edge washing his hands when a small fish appeared in his hands. The fish was an aquatic avatar of the principal Hindu god Vishnu. The fish spoke to him, saying, "Protect me and I will save you." "From what are you going to save me?" Manu asked. "A flood will carry away everything. From that flood, I will save you." "How am I to protect you?" asked Manu. The fish goes on to talk about how small in size he is, and how he will not be able to survive on his own due to larger predatory fish lurking in the depths. After keeping the small fish in a jar, and then, once a bit larger, in a hole in the ground, the small fish grew into a gasha, or great fish, bigger than any other. The fish exclaimed, "In such and such a year, that flood will come. You will then attend to me, and my advice to prepare a ship. When the flood has risen to you, you will enter the ship, and I will save you from it." Some time passed, and during that time, Manu began to build a boat from the warning of his water-dwelling friend. It wasn't much time after he built the ship when the waters came and encompassed the earth. The Gasha appeared once more to Manu from underneath the water's surface and told him to tie a rope to his horn to anchor the boat to the fish. The fish led Manu and his ship to the northern mountains, where he found a tree to tie his ship to and lived in safety until the waters resided back into normalcy. This tale involving Manu and the Gasha may seem strange to Western cultures until we look at the bare-bones basics of the story. A godly being who grows with great power tells a human man to be faithful to them in exchange for saving them from a mass flood, where they build a boat and find their way to a mountaintop, where a plant marks their safety. Yes, this is exactly the story of Noah and the Ark. The next stop on our search brings us to the woodlands of the Americas, amongst the Ojibwe of the Anishinaabe people, who have told a story passed down from generation to generation. The world became evil. People became distant and started to become disrespectful of each other. The Creator became unhappy, seeing humanity fall with an attitude as such, and decided to cause a great flood to purify the earth. The only survivor of this event was a man by the name of Buju, who upon seeing the waters rush in, built a raft to carry himself and some of the surrounding animals to safety. He floated in the vast waters of a full moon, waiting patiently for the waters to subside. When the weight became too much for Buju to handle, he decided to take action. He instructed some of the animals around him to complete the task of bringing him mud from deep under the water so that he could create the new world. He first sent a loon and then a beaver, but both failed at retrieving the mud from the floor of the deep waters. A small duck-like bird called a coot, named Ajigade, approached and asked what was going on. After Ajigade was rudely told off by a flock of birds, A debate ensued to decide how the solo man and a group of animals would achieve such a difficult task. A short time passed before the group noticed a body floating in the water near the raft. It was the lifeless being of OJIBWE, and in his mouth was the mud ENOCH needed. He balled up the mud and applied it to the back of a passing snapping turtle, and the new world was created, and it was filled with all the life forms on Earth, both flora and fauna. This story takes a slightly different path than previously discussed stories, but shares many similarities. Just like Noah and Manu, ENOCH built a boat in reaction to the Supreme Being's order to cleanse the world of all evil and hatred. They all had animal passengers with them and came to dry land through an act of faithfulness. The story of ENOCH and OJIBWE differs, however, in that a mortal man had the power to create land and life out of mud, an act usually attributed to the Supreme Being in other mythology. We have heard a few legends of a great flood, but what does science have to tell us about this topic? Is there any evidence to support a cataclysmic flood that encompassed the earth and rid it of its evil? Well, as modern science has come to show, the earth did have a massive flooding around the time of the Younger Dryas, some 13,000 to 11,500 years ago. This was due to a large-scale heating of the earth, which remained covered in glaciers from the glacial maximum. This time period does not match the parameters set in the book of Genesis, but time could have been measured differently and may have been mistranslated like a game of theological telephone. In 2012, Dr. Robert Ballard, an acclaimed underwater archaeologist who had previously hunted down the Titanic in an underwater submersible, led a search under the waves of the Black Sea to look for any evidence of a large-scale flooding. It is a common theory that the salty Black Sea was once a freshwater lake, used in the irrigation of farmland of ancient peoples. In his search, he uncovered some surprising evidence: an ancient shoreline. This shoreline would have been a beach where many came to drink, bathe, and gather water to keep their crops healthy. Once the flood came in, an approximate 150,000 square kilometers of dry land succumbed to the depths, killing all plants, animals, and humans who couldn't escape its tide. The curious aspect of these findings is that the dating of the ancient shoreline to 5000 BC would place it around the same time and location as Noah's flood in Genesis. In the Mayan text, Popol Vuh, the god of wind and storms, Huracan, used his abilities to cause a great flood after the second generation of humans angered the gods with their lack of devotion and disrespect. In ancient China, a story is told of the great flood of Gunyu, which raged across the land during the reign of Emperor Yao around 2000 BC. The emperor is quoted to have described it as such: like an endless boiling water, the flood is pouring forth destruction. Boundless and overwhelming, it overtops hills and mountains. Rising and ever rising, it threatens the very heavens. How people must be groaning and suffering. In Norse mythology, a very curious tale is told indeed, where the gods of Asgard, Odin, Vili, and Ve, slew the primordial ancestor of the Jotun, Ymir, and his blood flooded the earth. The account according to Norse mythology states, "The sons of Bor slew the giant Ymir, but when he fell, there flowed so much blood from his wounds that they drowned therein the whole race of the frost giants, except one, who escaped with his household. Him the giants called Bergelmer. He and his wife went on board his ark and saved themselves in it." Yes, Norse legends tell a tale of supreme gods slaying an evil ancient being, who is a representation of many beings, which caused a massive scale flood where only a handful of the victims survived by the way of an ark. These tales are of course told in a cultural fashion and are not expected to be taken literally in each individual story, but the core motif of the story is the same. A supreme god leads the charge to rid evil from the earth, causing a great flood. A handful of beings escape, using methods of flotation or some kind of repentance for the actions which caused the flood, where the Supreme Being makes a covenant to never flood the earth again, and the survivors find themselves on dry land once more, most times with the symbol of plant life. The stories change depending on culture. The time which they happened is still up for scientific debate, but one thing is very clear. With so many ancient peoples spreading lore of a great flood, it is nearly impossible to ignore that there probably was a point in human history, maybe even before written language was used, when the waters of an enraged deity encompassed the earth to dispel its evils and cleanse the old world to make way for the new. I'd like to thank you for joining us on another edition of the Eleusinian Society's The God Connection. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below.